This is OPI Linking Part 2, SQL Server. On the end screen, there's a link back to the playlist. Please subscribe to this channel and like the videos. Again, we need to first make references to source tables function correctly so that upstream data queries can execute properly as they're relinked. PowerOpI solutions working with SQL Server use ODBC linked servers or Open Rosette to read Excel source tables. So first, we'll concentrate on linked servers, then move on to Open Rosette and stored procedures. For semi-automatic relinking, if an OPI solution is moved, the Excel source table workbooks and Excel client workbooks should have a worksheet named Data Sources, which you should create. Structure table, table connection config, shown on this slide, is the user interface for the relinking procedures. You must create this table on worksheet Data Sources and also the worksheet value fields and buttons discussed here. The procedures on these slides are based on VBA from my website at softtoysoftware.com, linkingcode.txt, which you must install. In the structured table, table connection config shown, field connection name identifies each Excel data connection and Power Query connection to be relinked for SQL Server as well as for Access, Power Query, and Excel. For SQL Server links, field primary path specifies the server/SQL Server instance for this connection. Field alternate path is unused in this case. Field alternate path typically describes a relative path to a local source to be used if the full path specified in primary path becomes inaccessible. It may have additional uses not yet implemented in the VBA. Field table name specifies a table or query name to be used in some query types. Field link type defines functionality of each connection. Possible values are: pivot source is an Excel data connection from a table or query into a table or pivot report. Power Query is a Power Query connection from a table or query into a table or pivot report. MPP import is an Excel data connection from an MPP export file into a task data table. MPP query is a Power Query connection from an MPP export file into a task data table. Linked server is an Excel data connection used to set up a SQL Server linked server that uses ODBC to read from an Excel workbook. Field SQL contains either a dash to indicate that default SQL should be embedded in the connection. The default SQL is select star from table name, or else specify SQL to be executed for the connection. Sheet values in source table workbooks and client workbooks. Values shown on this tab, named subpath, hostname, and username, are helper values used to create entries in table connection config fields. Excel helper values database, link server name. That link server should be named for the workbook that the link server connects to containing source tables, and link server data source, the full path to the workbook containing the source tables, are used to configure SQL strings that configure a link server. You must create 3 named SQL strings. The SQL is covered in video OPI SQL Server Part 3 Stored Procedures and Open Rosette, Section 7-Automating Link Server Setup. Name the strings as follows. Drop_SP OPI link server drops the prior SP that creates the linked server. The SQL string is customized with linked server name. Create_SP OPI link server creates a new SP that creates the linked server. The SQL string is customized with the linked server name several places and linked server data source. Exec_SP OPI link server execs the SP that creates the linked server. The SQL string is customized with linked server name. Values for a linked server record in table connection config. Connection name is the name of an Excel data connection that will create the linked server SP. Primary path is server/instance. Link type is the value linked server, one word. Connection refresh all is off, disabled when the connection was created. button refresh linked server, you should create this button and set it up to call private sub refresh linked server _ click from installed linking code.txt. This button creates and links the connection named in table connection config field connection name having link type equals linked server. It updates server / instance in that connection. This button causes execution of SQL strings drop SPOPI linked server, create SPOPI linked server, and exec SPOPI linked server, which should be configured in Excel prior to execution, incorporating linked server name and linked server data source values. SQL source in video OPI-SQL Server Part 3 identifies where these changes should be made. The net of executing these SQL strings is to create a linked server that can be used by data queries to join tables read from Excel. The VBA in linking code.txt currently updates only one linked server, which covers many PowerOpI solutions which contain all tables in one source table workbook. The extension to that would be for the VBA to loop through all connections in the structured table, and for those with field link type equals linked server to use the value in the alternate path field as the full path to linked server data source and updating the SQL argument at data source with that value. The extension would take the value of the @server argument from the value in primary path from the row defining the connection. Other values from among the 3 linked server SQL strings would be similarly updated using field entries from the defining row. VBA to implement this would like to use structured references with structured tables from within the VBA, using those structured tables as containers for SQL strings. However, Excel doesn't provide native support for structured references from within VBA. A video sequence on structured reference in VBA will be provided on this channel to accomplish this. Referring to table fields and highlighted value names on this slide, all these Excel sheet values and table fields are the same as those described on the previous slide, including connection name, primary path, alternate path, table name, link type, SQL, host name, subpath, username, linked server name, and linked server data source. Field SQL is about to become more important. Table connection config field SQL defines SQL to put in the connection named on that row. SQL field value equals dash causes default SQL to put into the connection field command text, which is select star from table name for execution on refreshing the connection. But you can instead state SQL to be used, such as a data query containing one or multiple joins, or a linked server query using 4-part references, or an open row set query with multiple joins, each with a customized table source location, or a create statement to set up an SP, or an exec statement to execute an SP. In Excel, it works nicely to set up multi-line SQL in a structured table, implementing one SQL procedure per table column and one line of SQL per cell within that column, and to use text join to concatenate the cells in each column into SQL strings to be used in connections. Each SQL line within a cell contains either SQL text or could be an Excel expression to create customized configured SQL text needed. You could use named sheet helper values as variables to help build the expressions to make them easily relocatable. Each query string in a column defines a configured full query. For example, a data query using a linked server, a data query using open row set, or a set of queries setting up an SP. Excel function text join is used to concatenate each table column into a SQL string, typically referenced by the SQL field in table connection config for a connection definition. Button link to database file specs executes relinking of connections listed in table connection config. You should create this button object to run private sub command button 2 _ click seen in VBA file linking code.txt. This command relinks named Excel connections in rows that have table connection config link type equals pivot source, web query, MPP import, or MPP query. It updates the named connection server / instance from the primary path field in Table Connection Config. It updates Excel connection field command text from the SQL field value in Table Connection Config. Note that an open row set query should use link type equals pivot source for an Excel data connection or web query for a Power Query connection. In each join, open row set embeds a source table name and a value for the full path to each source table, such as helper value linked server data source, which is an absolute path to a source workbook that may contain many source tables. The open row set SQL lines should contain customizing Excel expressions to make relocation of data sources straightforward in case the sources or the SQL server are relocated. After reconfiguring the connection, the command then executes a refresh all operation, updating all connections with refresh all equals true, which includes link type equals pivot source and web query, but not MPP import, MPP query, or linked server, which are invoked by buttons refresh dates or refresh linked server. Button refresh dates on source table worksheets tab data source updates date connections. You should create this button object to run private sub command button one click seen in VBA file linking code.txt. This button updates Excel connections named in Table Connection Config field connection name that have link type equals MPP import or MPP query. Date connections typically occur in Excel source table workbooks where they contribute to setup of date tables and build tables. They would not be in a client workbook because they cannot be in a workbook initiating queries that depend on source data in the same workbook. Table connection config field table name equals task underscore table $1 in brackets, which is the name of the task data export worksheet from MS Project. Table connection config field SQL should be set to character dash so that connection command text will be set to select star from table name. The button refreshes connections identified in field connection name in rows with this link type, pulling records from task table $1 in brackets into workbook table targets named when connections were set up. Refresh all operation or pivot table refresh. This command affects link type equals pivot source or web query, but not MPP import, MPP query, or linked server. Table connection config field table name equals for field SQL equals dash, value of field table name is used as a source in the default SQL inserted into connection field command text. Otherwise, field table name is unused. The refresh all operation executes all connections with refresh all on, set when the connections were set up. This should include link type equals pivot source and web query. Connections with link type equals MPP import, MPP query, and link server should be set up with refresh all equals off. Going beyond, using stored procedures. First stored procedure setup, then stored procedure execution. Stored procedure setup. In Excel, define a SQL string combining procedures from OPI SQL Server in pseudocode, drop procedure if exists dbo.spname, semicolon, create procedure dbo.spname, begin, SQL new procedure, end, semicolon. Text join the column to concatenate it and name the text join spname string. String sp new procedure in spname dbo spname can be any SQL, including joins, open row set, exec, and so forth. Within the SQL string, include any Excel expressions needed to customize strings with full address, table names, etc. as needed, anticipating relinking to new location, reuse, and so forth. Set up an Excel data connection with refresh all equals on, command text equals value of SQL string, name of the connection is spname setup connection. Setup params in table connection config. Connection name equals spname setup connection, primary path equals server / instance, link type equals string pivot source, SQL equals expression spname string, i.e. an expression referencing the name text join. When all connections have been created and configured in Table Connection Config, click the button Link to Database File Specs on tab Data Sources, which will put the SQL into the connection, and then we'll execute refresh all, which will execute the SQL, creating the SP in SQL Server at the server/instance specified. Stored procedure execution. Define a SQL string exec dbo.spname and name the value as spNameExec. Set up an Excel data connection, name equals spNameConnection, refresh all equals on, as consistent with your application. Command text equals value of spNameExec string. Set up table connection config params, connection name equals spNameConnection, primary path equals server/instance, link type equals string pivot source, SQL equals expression equals spNameExec, and set up the connection to drive a name table or pivot report. On refresh, the name table or pivot report should update from sp dbo.spname. Several debugging tips. In a pivot table, you can double-click any numeric values cell, and a new Pivot Analysis tab will be created, showing all fields from all records contributing to the double-clicked cell value. You can use this to make sure that all expected records contribute and that no unexpected values contribute. Since all fields are shown, it can be confusing to figure out which table each field comes from. Include an abbreviation of table name in the name of each field to clarify where each field is from. For example, AK element for a field containing element name in table alloc, abbreviating that table name as AK. Since all records contributing are shown, it's useful to know exactly which records are chosen from each table, which may contain many more records, to see how records explode. You can put a field into each table called line number, populated by an expression equals row left paren right paren, to include each table line number field in the select. This is yet another reason to use select star, so that source table rows can be identified. Don't accumulate a lot of these tabs. Police them and delete them when they're not needed. This concludes the OPI linking sequence. More video sequences on this channel will cover handling of dates, BOM table structure, data normalization for joins and pivots, system development considerations, schedule optimization, and OPI deployment configurations. You'll find more information on the website. Please subscribe to this channel and like the videos.